Hi everyone, my name is Mohammed Sidki. I'm the AIA San Mateo County Chapter President. I want to welcome you all to our second event in our Carbon Neutral Building series. Today we are very excited to have Johanna Partin with us, Deputy Director at Building Decarbonization Coalition, as she will be discussing how to electrify and decarbonize commercial buildings and kitchens. Before we start, I'd like to make a few chapter announcements. First, we want to say thank you to our chapter sponsors, our gold chapter sponsors, Romig Engineers and MN Builders, and our silver chapter sponsors, Da Vinci Marble and BKG Structural Engineers. Upcoming events, so on September 23rd, we have our ARE 5.0 study session, and our guest speaker, Aisha Mora, is going to be talking about trusses. On September 22nd, we have how architects and interiors designers can work collaboratively. Linda Sullivan with SDS Design Studio will be the guest speaker. And on October 2nd, we will have our first in-person event. This is our annual home tour event for a single family residence designed by Malcolm Davis Architecture. This is in Pacifica. And this house was the winner of our 2020 Design Awards. And the event is limited to 30 tickets only. Okay, session format. So we'll start with the short presentation by Alexandria Gallizioli from Office of Sustainability, San Mateo County. And she will be talking about incentives and programs available through the county. At 6:15, Kenny Hung, our Committee on the Environment Chair, is going to do introduction to his committee, to BDC, and to the keynote speaker. At 6:20, Johanna Partin is going to do the main presentation. And then at 6:50, we'll have Q&A, discussion, and 7:10 is our closing. Feel free to add your questions in the chat box during the presentation. So you don't have to wait all the way to the Q&A session. You can just put your questions. Please mute yourself to reduce background noise if you're not speaking. And now, note that this session is being recorded. So I will be posting this session to our YouTube channel. If you go to YouTube and you search AIA San Mateo County, you should be able to find our channel. And then all the past recordings are there. First guest speaker. So Alexandria Gallizioli is the program coordinator for San Mateo County Energy Watch program, which specializes in energy efficiency and electrification measure support for small businesses, public schools, and local jurisdictions. During this webinar, she will be presenting on the holistic suite of small business program offerings offered by the San Mateo County Office of Sustainability and its partners. And Alexandria, you can take it from here.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Mohammed, for that introduction, and it's wonderful to meet you all tonight. Thank you so much for being here and for listening into this presentation and for others tonight who are also presenting. As Mohammed is mentioning, I'm going to be presenting specifically on the San Mateo County Office of Sustainability Small Business Resources. So that's internal and external partners that have all come together to collaborate on a holistic suite of offerings for our small business and medium business customers for some programs throughout the county. So next slide, please. So this is a broad overview of our program support. As you can see, our Small Business Resource Center is really at the hub, and this was born from the need to go virtual earlier on this year and last. And so right now we are really working virtually as much as possible, trying to serve our small and medium-sized businesses through the variety of programs that you see here. And these slides will be shared afterwards, but I am going to try to get through them fairly quickly. But you can see here that there are different or specific offerings from each program that serve different sorts of businesses, restaurants being one large category for us, small or medium-sized businesses being another, but we also have many measures and incentives that we are able to support and provide technical assistance for through a variety of our programs. Next slide, please. So the first that I'm going to touch on today is San Mateo County Energy Watch, and that is the program that I personally am managing currently. So I do coordinate this referral-based program connecting businesses with contractors, technical and financial assistance to work on energy efficiency and electrification measures. Specifically, our program is able to provide benchmarking and energy rate analyses, so looking really at the customer's current energy uses and seeing how we can improve upon them, whether that's through a remodel or the installation of new equipment, replacement on burnout, or even planning for future construction. In addition to this, we partnered with many programs, one of which being Staples Energy. So if you're looking for lighting measure support specifically, this is a really great option for you. In many cases, think strip malls or other areas that have large energy consumption being used from light bulbs, especially those that are not efficient. Staples is a great partner here. Next slide, please. Second, we have our Green Business Program. Now, this is a much more holistic look at a business. They are able to work with small businesses throughout all categories of sustainability, as you might see here, through water, waste reduction, energy efficiency, etc. And so what they're able to provide is consultation services for businesses who are looking to become more green and really who have that green ethos at heart. And so if you know of a business or you're working with a business currently, or maybe looking for new construction for a business, this is really the best program for you, I believe, because they're able to look at the whole business as opposed to just one component. Right now, they're also able to offer a few incentives. We are also working on a water incentive, which is very exciting, but not quite finalized yet. So unfortunately, I can't announce that or confirm that officially. But regardless, you are able to get businesses certified through the Shop Green app, which is really, really desirable right now, especially as businesses are really trying to come back into the ring. After the past year, a lot of small and medium businesses have really faced economic hardship. And so this is a great way to get free marketing in addition to reducing their green footprint. Next slide, please. Third, we're going to talk about Bay Run Business. Now, this is definitely more of the small to medium or even larger in some case businesses. And one of their largest offerings right now is the Pay for Performance program, which offers incentives for energy efficiency projects. So think refrigeration, if you have a kitchen potentially, replacing current appliances with Energy Star certified appliances, those are all covered as well. Or if you're looking to really just manage a building from a whole building perspective, they've recently partnered with JewelSmart and mCloud to offer building management systems via a subscription-based model. And so that subscription fee is really just coming out of their total energy cost, and they're saving energy in addition to that, which of course, as we all know, saves money. So this is a really great way to manage those medium businesses, sometimes even larger businesses, if they are looking to do so. Finally, they also offer free energy assessment and project management for any energy efficiency or electrification projects that qualify under their program. Next slide, please. All right, and one of the last programs that I'm going to talk about today is the EV Ready program. Now, many of us, if you're located in the Bay Area or California, know of Peninsula Clean Energy. Specifically right now, we are working with them in the commercial space on support for EV charging projects. And so whether this is upgrading current EV charging stations or adding new stations to a facility or a property, they're able to help. They're able to connect our businesses with negotiated pricing, both for the chargers and for rates thereafter, as well as provide access to a network of contractors that are trusted and proven to do excellent work on the peninsula. Finally, you are also eligible, or your customer might also be eligible for free technical assistance and project scoping via Clear Result. So if a business or that medium-sized chain or even new construction is unsure if EV charging would be a good fit for them, they're most likely eligible, for that free technical assistance as well. So it's a great place to start if you just want to explore this opportunity. Next slide, please. Finally, I wanted to just touch on program financing and incentives because I know this is a major deciding factor when you're thinking about going with a contractor. So as you can see here, we have 3 main programs that are offering financing services right now. And in addition to that, the Green Business Program offering rebates and incentives towards qualified projects. So for those businesses who are really trying to become Green Business certified, they might just get free money essentially. And as I mentioned, they're also adding a water-based incentive program in the near future. So please look for that coming up. Otherwise, we have 0% financing right now through PG&E. So if you're looking to go through the Energy Watch program to upgrade your lights, HVAC, or electrify your property, this is a great place to look first. Next slide, please. So finally, I just wanted to talk about our resource center, as I mentioned at the very beginning, which really just combines or collects all of these services and offerings. So I did leave the link here, and this should be available to you after the presentation tonight. So please feel welcome to explore that. But just a quick overview here, it does give you a very play-by-play, step-by-step look at all of our programs. So it highlights each of their key features as well as their differentiating factors. And then at the bottom of the page, we also touch on that financing piece as well. And in addition to that, it is updated with any rebates or incentives that are going to be ongoing throughout our program cycles. And there is also a hotline here that will actually connect you with myself. And so please feel welcome to call. I would love to talk to you about these programs and make sure that you end up in the right place, because I know it can be really difficult and confusing to navigate multiple programs at once. So that support is provided there. But if you don't like the phone, I understand that completely. I prefer to not call people on the phone sometimes on my personal time. We also have a contact and interest form. And so you can fill that out just with who you are, what you're interested in, and a bit more about your business or your service. And I would be happy to communicate with you via email as well. Next slide, please. And finally, I just wanted to touch on something that is going on throughout our office right now. We are working towards an electrification, or we are working for an electrification technical assistance program. So this is something that is also being provided by Peninsula Clean Energy and the Silicon Valley Clean Energy. So for those of us who are in the Bay Area, this is specifically applying to you. And there again is free technical assistance being offered for architects, builders, developers, and anyone else involved in that all electric building policy management or technologies. So if you would like to learn more about this, you can visit the link down below at allelectricdesign.org. Next slide, please. Finally, I just want to thank you again for your time tonight. I really do appreciate it. And I know that was a lot of information all at once, so I will be hanging around until the discussion at the very end. Please feel welcome to ask more questions if you have them, or you're welcome to reach out at my email or hotline number here. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much, Alexandria. This was very, very beneficial. Thank you so much. And as Alexandria mentioned, we will be actually sharing the slides in the end. And she will be sticking around to the Q&A. So if you have any questions, or you can just ask in the chat box below, and she's here, so she can just respond to you right away. Okay, next I want to introduce Kenny Hunt, architect and senior associate at BES Architects and Engineers. And he is our Committee on the Environment Chair for AIA San Mateo County. Kenny?
Hey, good evening, everyone. It's just really excited to be here. I know tonight we have really diverse group of participants, not only architects, designers, but also engineers, folks from city, state, and county governments, and as well as folks as far as from East Coast. And it's just exciting to see so many passionate people joining our event tonight. And like Mohammed said, I'm one of the founding members of the AIA San Mateo County Committee on the Environment. Others include Hilary, Petra, and Ross, and Mohammed, of course. Yeah, we are really, really passionate about promoting sustainability design. We want to share the knowledge, design strategy with our members to achieve the most sustainable, healthy project for our clients and also our communities that will be best for the environment. And tonight, we've been working with our partners, building carbon decarbonization coalition for the last couple of months on this presentation, and which is a group of building industry stakeholders, energy providers, environmental organization, and local government. Really focus on working really hard to eliminate fossil fuels from buildings. And we are very honored and excited to have Johanna Partin, the Deputy Director of BDC, to be our keynote speaker tonight. Johanna has more than 30 years of experience in the fields of climate change, renewable energy, microfinance, sustainable development, gender equality, and she has worked both locally and globally as well, more than 15 countries. It's really amazing. And prior to joining the BDC as a Deputy Director, she was the founder and director of Carbon Neutral Cities Alliance, which is a collaboration of leading global cities working to achieve carbon neutrality in the next 10 to 20 years, which is the most aggressive greenhouse gas reduction targets undertaken by any organizations. Of course, her stellar resume, including serving as the North America Regional Director for the C40 Cities Climate Leadership Group. She is also she was serving as the Senior Policy Advisor on environment to San Francisco Mayor Gavin Newsom and Evan Lee. She is also the board member of the Bay Area Air Quality Management District, and also working with the San Francisco Department of the Environment. So we are all very excited. I don't think you want to hear me talk anymore. So without further ado, please welcome Johanna Partin. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for the invitation to be here, and to all of the participants for taking time to talk with us this evening, during the evening, about building decarbonization. And I'm going to talk a little bit about I'm going to start talking about the why. Why are we talking about commercial building decarbonization and electrification? Why is it important to talk about that? Not because you should agree with the reasons that I think it's important, but rather so that we can really understand why policymakers are moving in the direction that they're moving. And then we're going to spend a lot of time talking about the what's happening in the decarbonization space, in the regulatory sphere, in the industry, so that you and your clients can find ways not to just comply with some of the regulations that are coming, but hopefully really thrive in it. But first, I would like to get a sense of who's in the room. So I think we have a poll that we can launch quickly to get a better sense of who is from which industries. So great, thanks. So if you could take a moment just to answer this question quickly. Which of these industries best describes your role or your field? Architect, designer, developer, owner, energy consultant, engineer, city or county official, environmental NGO, community-based organization, or other.
Okay, we have 56%. We'll give another 20 seconds. And okay, I will end polling now.
Okay. So heavily skewed toward architects and designers, no surprise, but we do have some developers and owners in the audience, some energy consultants and engineers. I am not an engineer, so I may be calling on you for some of the more technical questions, but it's really great to see the folks who are in the room. So thank you so much for taking time to walk us through that. So, as Kenny mentioned, we're going to be talking about some of the regulatory reforms that are really accelerating the pace of the electrification of commercial buildings. We're going to cover some of the incentives, investments, and infrastructure upgrades that are required to achieve commercial building electrification objectives. And then we're going to dig in a little bit more on commercial kitchen electrification and some of the innovations that are happening in the space. And then I'm going to end with some of the myths and realities of building electrification, because there are a lot of them out there. So first, as Kenny mentioned, sorry, I am having trouble with my screen here. There we go. First, a little bit more about BDC. Kenny mentioned the Building Decarbonization Coalition is a diverse coalition of about 300 stakeholders, including builders, designers, manufacturers, local governments, state governments, NGOs, community-based organizations, all working together as a coalition to chart a safe and rapid and equitable transition away from the use of fossil fuels in buildings. And we use a 5-pronged strategy, which is really focused on stopping gas subsidies, phasing out the gas, the use of gas in all buildings, phasing out the sale of gas appliances, investing heavily in equitable electrification, and then decommissioning gas infrastructure and reinvesting those investment dollars into ensuring a just transition for impacted workers. And a little bit about me, a little bit of real talk. I've been working in the climate field for about 30 years, as Kenny mentioned in his generous introduction. I started off in the utility regulatory space in California, moved over to the international space and designed renewable energy off-grid systems, came back and went hyper-local and worked for a city and then worked across cities. So I consider myself a pretty climate-educated person. This is my roof. This is my son plugging in our EV. We have weatherized our home. We've installed highly efficient windows and doors, smart technologies, and I'm a proud dark green member of Clean Power SF here in San Francisco. But here's where the real talk comes in. This is my furnace, this is my water heater, and this is my stove, all gas. And I tell you that not to publicly shame myself, but I really think that I'm like a lot of the general public out there that either hasn't known about the significant climate, health, and safety issues associated with natural gas, or wanted to change out of my dirty appliances into clean ones, but either couldn't afford to or had other competing economic priorities, or like me, has really felt kind of stuck with my old, dirty, inefficient gas technologies, and I haven't really wanted to deal with the hassle of replacing them. So we are going to talk about why it's important to convince people and to make it convenient and easy and affordable for them to do exactly what I am just about to do. So that picture is going to hopefully look very different in about 6 months. So what we're finding now with all of our work to get rid of coal plants and to reduce emissions from vehicles, that emissions from natural gas is now the fastest growing climate pollutant in the world. Burning natural gas in commercial and residential buildings accounts for more than 10% of US emissions. And the term natural gas, I want to address that really quickly. It's the result of a 1930s gas industry marketing campaign. It's a pretty amazing campaign, really, to give the impression that their product was cleaner than fossil fuels, but it's very much a fossil fuel. And the United States is the largest consumer of natural gas in the world. We're ahead of Russia, we're well ahead of China. Natural gas is extracted all over the United States. The US is the second largest exporter of natural gas in the world behind Russia. And natural gas is produced in 32 states, mostly in Texas, Oklahoma, New Mexico. And California is the largest consumer of the second largest consumer of natural gas in the country, second only to Texas. 2/3 of our households use natural gas for home heating and cooking. But while we do have some big natural gas formations in California, specifically offshore and coastal areas of Northern California, we do import 85% of our natural gas from 6 large gas lines. The whole gas supply chain is really leaky. This is dangerous, as we know, because methane is a super pollutant when it comes to greenhouse gas emissions. It's 84 times more effective than CO2 at capturing heat quickly in our atmosphere. And the extraction and storage and transmission of the whole process for natural gas is very leaky. There was a study that came out in 2018 that looked at the oil and gas industry and found that it emits 13 million metric tons of methane from its operations each year, which is really enough to offset the climate benefits of burning natural gas instead of coal. And in fact, the study found that emitting this much methane roughly equals the entire methane emissions of coal plants that were operating back in 2015. And in particular, hydraulic fracturing or fracking is used to get natural gas is very leaky. Satellite analysis has shown us that at the point of where the fracking wells are, about 4% is leaked right there at the point of extraction. And that's not to mention the serious contamination that happens with our drinking water wells as a result of fracking. And we're also seeing that in most of the areas of the United States, our gas distribution system is quite old. The darker states on this map show the gas distributions that were built before 1970. So they're 30 plus almost 50 years old, many of them, and therefore nearing the end of their useful life and coming up on replacement. So if you look at all of the buildings that you all are designing and building, these last two slides really show that there's a significant amount of leakage and emissions even before the gas gets to the building. And so these embodied emissions are a big part of the building's footprint. Now, in California, many of our communities, as you well know, I'm sure, rank the highest in the United States in terms of poor air quality. And that's during normal times, not even during wildfires. And we're seeing that while we're making good progress on power plants, reducing emissions from power plants, and reducing smog causing pollution from vehicles, we're way behind on buildings. The current state of air quality problems in California is that the gas that we are producing in building is producing 6 to 7 times more smog causing pollution than power plants, and twice as much as all of the cars that are on the road driving around the state. And this is because, as I said, we've made progress in power plants and vehicles. We're way behind on addressing emissions from our buildings. And if you break that down by air district, on this slide, you can see each of the bubbles represents a different air district in the state. The last two, the largest ones, are the South Coast and the Bay Area. And you can see that the buildings are producing far more emissions than cars, even in those very car-heavy communities. And we're seeing this around the country. This is from a New York Times article about a study that was released in 2019 about the biggest culprits of premature death from air pollution and where that was coming from. And what they found was that now the largest source of premature death from air pollution is burning fossil fuels for heating in buildings. 1/4 of all premature deaths from air pollution comes from emissions from the gas that we're burning in buildings. And that's all the pollution that goes outside. That's the pollution that is emitted from the tailpipes of our buildings, but not all of that pollution escapes. As we know, there are some serious emissions that are kept inside our buildings. This picture on the left is a real picture from the 1980s when we didn't know that it was harmful to smoke around children and in public places, not to mention having them blow out their birthday candles over a steaming, ashtray. And the thought of this, looking at this picture, this is laughable now. We wouldn't do this now. We would never do this. But why have we decided then that it's okay to install a small fossil fuel combustion machine in our kitchens where we're cooking and eating with our families? When you burn gas, you release some pretty serious, dangerous toxin. The three main ones are nitrogen oxides, or NOx, carbon monoxide, and formaldehyde. Nitrogen oxides are the main ones, and the federal EPA has been trying to reduce NOx for many, many years because they're so damaging. And as we know, it decreases lung function and causes respiratory problems like asthma, especially in children. Carbon monoxide is deadly. That's why we're required to put carbon monoxide sensors in all of our homes, yet it's coming out of our kitchens. And formaldehyde is one of the leading causes of childhood leukemia and other cancers. And this is what happens when we cook with gas in our kitchens. Excuse me. A study done by Lawrence Berkeley National Labs in 2014 examined 60,000 homes in California and found that in half of those homes, within 2 minutes of a gas burning stove being on, they exceeded the 1-hour federal legal limit of exposure to these pollutants. A similar study was done more recently by the Climate Council in Australia, which earlier this year found that a child living with gas cooking in the home faces a comparable risk of asthma to a child that lives with secondhand smoke in the home. And that households that cook with gas were 32% more likely to develop asthma than those living in homes without gas cooktops. So this has a profound impact on childhood health and family health, and it also has a profound impact on inequities and injustice, because we know that we usually find higher pollution levels in older, smaller, less ventilated homes, and we know that those are typically found in lower income and BIPOC households and communities. So let's talk a little bit about the cost of gas. Climate policies are already starting to drive a drop in gas demand. It's slow, but we're starting to see this. And we know that the way that gas infrastructure financing happens is that gas utilities and pipeline companies put the infrastructure in the ground, and then we as ratepayers pay for it. So there are fixed costs being allocated to all of us as ratepayers. And as more buildings are electrified and there's less demand for gas, then that's going to mean that there were fewer customers on the remaining gas system in order to pay for those fixed costs or stranded assets. And that leads, of course, to higher gas rates. And as we're starting to deal with some of the aging gas infrastructure, so that we start to avoid things like the explosions that happen in San Bruno and increased safety regulations, that also leads to additional higher gas costs. And those higher rates make electrification even more promising and economically attractive, and more people make the choice to get off the system and onto the electric system, which then leads to less gas demand, higher prices, and so on. So this is a circle that we're already starting to see. And even now, before electrification has really started to take hold, this chart shows the price of natural gas for commercial customers in California between 1989 and 2021. Commercial prices have gone from about $5 per 1,000 cubic feet in 1989 to about $13 now. And usually what's even more difficult to accommodate for commercial customers is not so much the upward trend in price, but the dramatic cost fluctuations. And so you can see those dramatic fluctuations that have been happening, which make it very difficult to plan. So that's the cost of natural gas prices. Let's talk about the cost of constructing gas buildings versus all electric buildings. And the simple reality is that it costs more to put two types of infrastructure into a building than one. These numbers are for housing, but of course it's more expensive for commercial buildings and for mid to high-rise buildings. This slide shows the average costs that we've gotten from filings at the California Public Utilities Commission of piping gas infrastructure to the home, plumbing that gas around the home, and then installing the ventilation systems to get the pollutants out and into the atmosphere. And so it's about an average of $7,000 per home to install gas infrastructure in a new home. And the National Association of Home Builders puts out a report every year that looks at the impact of every $1,000 of increased cost that we spend to build housing across every major metropolitan area in the country, and how many families that prices out of the ability to afford a home within that jurisdiction. In 2020, they found that for every $1,000 of increase in housing costs, you price out 160,000 average households from being able to afford to purchase that home. So if you take their numbers at the low end of what it costs to put in gas infrastructure into new home, about $7,000 per new home, that's more than 1 million families that are being priced out of being able to afford that home because of the choice to build that home with gas. So what do we do about it? Commercial buildings comprise 13% of California's emissions footprint. The state, as you know, is putting in a lot of policies and incentives to reduce transportation emissions. We don't yet have a lot of great technological options for decarbonizing industry and agriculture, so we may need to preserve our remaining fossil fuels for those sectors, but we have excellent technologies available to us today that we can use to decarbonize buildings. So we do have technologies available that can help us electrify all of these end uses. I'm going to focus today on the big ones: space heating, water heating, and cooking. So here are some of the barriers to electrification. You know this because you're talking to your clients and your customers about why they should electrify. And here's probably what you're perceiving and what they're saying back to you. Space and water heating are responsible for about 70% of direct fuel use in commercial buildings. So those are the big ones. The rest is cooking and other uses. 93% of commercial buildings use non-electric heating fuel. It's the primary source of emissions for those uses in commercial buildings. And while combustion while emissions from fuel combustion in residential buildings in California fell 18% between 2000 and 2016, combustion emissions in commercial buildings actually rose 9%. So we have to deal with this. We need to take clean electricity, which is being produced either on the grid or more directly on site, combine it with highly efficient electric technologies, such as heat pumps and induction stoves, and then that will give us the alternative to natural gas. This is a map of all of the states that have adopted renewable portfolio standards across the country. And so here is where we're starting to see an increasing amount of renewable electricity from on the grid in these states. The darker the state, the higher the level of commitment. As you know, California has committed to the most aggressive renewable portfolio standard, 100% by 2045. Washington State is the same. And the lighter blue states are lower commitments, but they're still starting the process of moving toward a cleaner grid. Now, I know that many of you are already designing for use for this equipment in your buildings and projects, and some of you are engineers, you know this technology better than I, but I thought just in case, let's talk quickly about how a heat pump operates. It operates in much the same way as our refrigerator does, just in reverse. It uses a condenser with a refrigerant and then transfers that heat from one location to another. So in the case of a refrigerator, it transfers heat from the air inside your refrigerator to the outside. So if you put your hand on the back of your refrigerator where the coils are, you'll feel the heat on the back of the refrigerator. That heat used to be inside, and the heat pump is taking it outside. So the same can be done to heat and cool air and water. A heat pump water heater, even in below freezing temperatures, can still extract heat from the air outside of the tank of water and bring it into a heat pump, space heater, or water heater. And this can be done in a unitary system like in your home, or it can be done in a centralized system like in an, in an office building. The same technology can be used in reverse. It's basically an air conditioner that can run in both directions. Modern designers are really starting to look at heat pumps as the high-tech systems, the future of what heating and cooling should look like in buildings, and our traditional AC systems as old kind of Soviet era systems that are becoming outdated and will be obsolete. These systems are incredibly efficient. The beauty with a heat pump is because you're not using a whole lot of energy to actually produce the heat. You're just moving it from one place to another, and that's why it's so efficient. When you look at 1 therm of input from a natural gas boiler, you get 0.8 therms of heating. And at the bottom of the screen, you see what you can get when you put in 1 kilowatt hour of input into a heat pump. You can get 3 to 4.5 kilowatt hours of heating. So you're not actually producing the heat, you're pulling heat from one area to another, which is why you hear people talking about heat pumps being 300 to 400% efficient. You only use electricity to move heat in the condenser and then potentially to run a fan as well. RMI did a study of the greenhouse gas impact of switching water and space heating from gas to heat pumps, looking at the average grid mix across the US. So they looked at every state from West Virginia, which is still about 95% coal, to much cleaner states like New York, Maine, and California. And what they found was that in every single state, even the ones with a dirty electricity mix, there is a greenhouse gas benefit of switching your space and water heating to heat pumps rather than running them off of natural gas. The darker the blue, the bigger the greenhouse gas benefit. So in the Northwest and the West and the Southwest, you get about a 50% greenhouse gas benefit from switching away from natural gas. But even in the dirtier states, in West Virginia, for example, you get a 25% greenhouse gas benefit from switching. So because of this incredible efficiency, even when you have a dirty electric grid, you still get a greenhouse gas benefit. Not to mention that you get an almost complete elimination of nitrogen oxides from your heating. While space and water heating require the most energy and therefore have the biggest greenhouse gas reduction potential, people generally don't care about their hot water and cold air and and cold and hot air. They don't care where it comes from as long as it works, but people care very deeply about their stoves. So we're going to talk about induction cooking. Induction cooking isn't like the traditional electric coil systems that you may think of when you think of electric cooking, in which you're heating up an electric resistance coil, and then that coil is heating up the pan itself. What magnetic induction cooking does is it uses electromagnetic fields to excite the molecules within the pot itself, and that generates the heat within the pot. So induction is incredibly efficient. The transfer of energy is about 90% efficient because it doesn't generate any waste heat that goes to the outside of the pot or the pan. A best-in-class gas stove gets you about 30% efficiency. It's a massive differential. And that is because 70% of the heat that's being generated is escaping into the surrounding air. So that not only wastes heat and causes more emissions, but it also heats up the air in your kitchen. So you've heard the expression, you know, if you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen. With an induction stove, that expression is no longer valid. And in fact, what we see is in induction kitchens, you sometimes have to heat the kitchen in winter months in cold places because you don't get the heat that's coming off of the stove. And that's one of the things that professional chefs love about induction cooking, is that their kitchen is much more comfortable to cook in. So not only that, it's a better cooking experience. The Sacramento Municipal Utility District, SMUD, did a study with the Food Service Technology Center in San Ramon, and they looked at the two most important aspects of cooking for chefs: power and control. They want to be able to heat up something quickly, and they want to have ultimate control of the food that they're cooking. They compared 3 different kinds of induction stoves with 2 electric resistance stoves and 1 top-of-the-line gas stove. The 3 induction stoves are the red lines, the 2 electric resistance stoves are the green lines, and the 1 gas stove is the blue line. And what this chart shows is how long it took to boil about 12 pounds of water, which is about enough to cook pasta for a family of 4. And you can see that the 3 induction stoves very quickly got water to the boiling point, anywhere from 9 to 11 minutes. The electric resistance stoves took about 15 to 17 minutes, and the gas stove about 18 to 19 minutes. So both the electric coil and the gas stoves took about twice as long as the induction stove. And you can see that the control of the induction stove is so amazing that you can quickly get that water back down as well, which is important for chefs. So what this is showing you is that induction cooking is about 2 times more powerful, and it gives you about 3 times as much control over how easily you can cook the food. Finally, induction is healthier because you're not having any pollution coming off of it, and it's also safer. It's cooled to the touch almost immediately after you cook with it, and so burns are quite rare. Folks that love induction stoves. So Consumer Reports loves induction stoves. In 2020, 6 of their top 8 ranges were induction. And in addition to the power and control, they cited the durability and the ease of cleaning. For those of you that have a gas stove, you know that to clean it, you have to take the grill off, you have to pull the food off, you have to scrub it, you have to put the grills back on. But with induction, all you have to do is spray and wipe the glass surface. And it's got significant cool factor. So people often describe the induction stove as the Tesla for your kitchen. These are some of my favorite examples. This is the Elika Nikola Tesla, 1 induction stove. It's got a very cool built-in vent. That's the photo on the left, where it vents not the emissions from the fuel, but rather the smoke and the steam into the center of the stove. And then there is, on the right is a picture of what modern vents look like. This is what they call their invisible ceiling hood on the right. So more and more high-end restaurants are starting to renovate their kitchens to be all electric, from the French Laundry to Café Ficelle, which has represented the United States in the French baking competition for the last 5 years, to Wolfgang Puck, to Guy Fieri. They're all huge fans of induction. And even the Great British Bake Off, which is my personal favorite TV show, loves induction because of its modularity and its portability. You can buy a portable induction hob for about $100, and you just plug it into any 120 volt, 15 amp electrical outlet. So I would like to show, if technology allows me, a little bit of a video so you can hear straight from a chef. And let's see if this works.
I'm gonna saute that with garlic. Turn this on. When cooking with the wok, it's usually over an open flame to create that nice sear, the high heat. But with the induction burner, like button setting up to the temperature that I want within seconds, the wok just heat up. That, I was really impressed with. And you see that ready to go, then you just carefully add the meat to sear it. Steak cooks at really high heat, so knowing that I can control the exact temperature and seeing the results, I look at the wok now and I'm like, I wouldn't mind having this at home. The garlic is caramelized. The meat has a nice color. I'll add the onions. When we're sauteing veggies, you want to stir constantly. Once you see that the vegetable is kind of wilting, that's when you know it's done. That was what, 2-3 minutes, and you have complete lunch or dinner. So now I'll just turn this off, and instantly you can hear it stop cooking. So yeah. When I was young, I spent a lot of time with my mom in the kitchen. She's been the biggest influence in what I do. I would call her.
Okay, sorry about that. So you can see that chefs really like it. There are ways to cook with different styles of food. These are a couple resources that are available. These are some really great resources. The Food Service Technology Center, especially, they offer an induction demonstration program that will demo commercial and residential induction equipment live or virtually for you if you are a developer, architect, builder, etc. They offer great classes. I strongly encourage you to look at those. And then I'm going to sum up the why with this. This is from a Bloomberg article a couple weeks ago. So according to a report from a commercial real estate broker there, corporate tenants in London that have made public promises to cut emissions to net zero are paying rent premiums of more than 12% for their offices. So we're starting to see demand really driving up commercial rent prices as well. So just quickly, I want to cover a little bit on the policy front, and then I'll try and wrap up. A number of local jurisdictions, as you know, are starting to require electrification in their jurisdiction. Berkeley passed the first one in 2019. PG&E showed up in support. And now 48 additional cities have followed in Berkeley's footsteps, and another 60 are on the way to adopting similar electric codes. Most of them are really focused on all building types as opposed to kind of prescriptive equipment types. And you can go to this website here. BDC maintains a website that examines the status of all of those different local REACH codes. You can read the code, you can see what each of them has. And these are the ones that are happening with jurisdictions in San Mateo. We heard it from San Mateo County about some of the great programs they offer, but San Mateo cities are really leading the way as well. As you can see, a number of cities have adopted new construction all electric code requirements. And now a couple of leading cities are also working to require retrofits in existing buildings. Similar codes are being adopted at the state level, and you may have heard that Title 24, the new Title 24 code was passed. And the new 2022 code, which will go into effect January 2023, this covers residential, but as you know, as goes residential, soon goes commercial. It's the first code in the country to require a heat pump for at least one heating end use. And it is the first in the country to recognize the polluting aspects of cooking with natural gas. This is a really big deal. It requires a higher ventilation standard if you build units with natural gas cooking. And it's also the first code in the nation to require pre-wiring for all electric appliances. So in multifamily, similar requirements. And for commercial, the new code is not touching it as much yet. It does have a couple of requirements for single zone space heating, except in restaurants, hotels, and medical facilities. It does require heat pump water heaters in some small schools. And for the first time ever, it requires solar and battery storage for non-residential. So while the 2022 code is not an all-electric code, it is highly electric favored. And it is expected to result in 50 to 80% of all new construction being all electric for the applicable building types. And we do believe it sets the stage for the next round of code updates to be all electric. A couple of state funding programs available. The most relevant one for commercial buildings is the SGIP program, the Self-Gen Incentive Program, which provides incentives for existing, new, and emerging distributed energy resources, $44 million allocated for heat pump water heaters. And you can see some other incentives available to other building types. Wanted to mention also the new budget that the governor is expected to announce on January 10th includes about $500 million to address extreme heat. And we're starting to see this more and more across states and across the country, where people are really suffering because they don't have air conditioning, because they've never needed air conditioning, and now we do need it. And so there's a lot of money in the new budget for heat pumps for cooling in vulnerable communities. If it passes, it'll be the largest heat pump incentive program in the country. So I'm going to end with a couple of building decarbonization myths, realities, and somewhere in between. So heat pumps don't work in cold climates. This is not true. It is true that the early technologies rely on a simple vapor compression cycle, and so do not perform well under freezing temperatures. But the newer products have variable speed compressors, and therefore are pretty capable of performing well below -10 degrees Fahrenheit. And this has been tested in Minnesota and some other pretty extreme cold climates. We know that induction is not the same as electric resistance, although a lot of people think it is. Induction doesn't work well with woks. We just saw that works quite well, and you can use it for charring peppers and charring tortillas. There's all kinds of ways that you can use it. And finally, induction stoves do have magnetic fields. They won't cause your pacemaker to stop working. They do have magnetic fields, but they're only up to about 3 inches above the cooktop. So as long as you're not laying on your stove, then you should be fine. There are some real concerns though. Heat pump water heaters do require access to a sufficient volume of air, which means that they must either be installed in a large enough room or they must be ducted to the outside. Electric equipment could require an electrical panel upgrade, and in fact, in many cases, we see that it does. This is not a concern for new construction, but for existing, it's probably the biggest challenge we face in decarbonizing buildings. And finally, induction stoves do actually require, in many cases, new pots and pans. So if you can stick a magnet onto your pot or your pan, it will work. Copper doesn't work, glass doesn't work, but steel and iron does work. And then finally, the somewhere in betweens. So upfront heat pump equipment costs are higher than conventional gas equipment. This is true. However, these are more than offset by avoiding the cost of plumbing the building for gas, connecting it to the gas main, using a single heat pump for both heating and cooling. And so you offset a lot of those upfront costs with heat pumps. Induction stoves do tend to be more expensive than lower end gas stoves, but they're much cheaper than higher end gas ranges. A really good 30-inch 4-top Miele induction stove costs about $3,000, whereas the equivalent quality Viking gas stove costs upwards of $6,000. And then finally, heat pump water heaters are perceived as being noisy, but really they only make about as much noise as a refrigerator. So with that, I shall end, and we really seek to help the design and construction community and local jurisdictions navigate this building decarbonization path. We provide monthly policy calls and regulatory developments. We can connect you with technical resources. And so we really encourage you to come and work with us as we work to decarbonize buildings, both in California and across the country. We'd be really delighted to have you join us, and thank you so much for having me and for having this forum that allows, really the leading designers and drivers of pollution-free buildings to get together and discuss solutions. And I'm happy to answer any questions now, or feel free to contact me going forward. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Johanna, for an excellent presentation. Thank you so much. For any question, just put your name in the chat bar, and just so we have it organized. So I will start with John Fullerton. John, you had a question. And sorry, you can ask questions for either Johanna or Alexandria. This is a combined session for both of them. So Alexandria with the county of San Mateo, and Johanna.
Hi, my question is about commercial kitchens, all electric commercial kitchens. I'm working on several large projects that have, their spec projects for spaces for, commercial kitchens. And there is a concern out there about kitchen operators that are reluctant to use all electric kitchens. I noticed in your presentation that you indicated there's a lot of chefs that like it. I think it would be really useful if you had a survey of food service operators, restaurants that embrace all electric kitchens. That would be useful information for the developers to feel confident that creating a space that only has all electric would be something that would be marketable to them.
Thank you for the suggestion, and great minds think alike. We are working on that. And so we have what we call the Kitchen Electrification Group, affectionately known as the KEG, where we get together and talk to folks about what would be helpful as you work with clients to advance commercial electric kitchens. And this is something that's come up. And so this is something that we are planning to do going forward. And so we'll be very happy to share the results of that survey with you when it becomes available.
Right. Yeah, it'd be very useful, I think.
Okay. Next, we have a question from Susan. Susan, you want to ask your question?
Sure. Johanna, this was so educational because I'm like you. I have those same. That was like my water heater, my gas stove. That was very educational. And I know we've been like John. We've been working on new buildings, large commercial buildings, and we have a client that is in a city where their REACH code has not been set for a new building. And they were evaluating should they go ahead and go to all electric building. And their analysis was that it was going to be $20 to $40 per square foot more in construction cost. And I wondered if you had any comment on that to go all electric.
For kitchens or for the building as a whole?
For the building as a whole, say 100,000 square foot building.
That sounds pretty high. I'm sure there are folks on the line that can offer some case studies. We do have a series of case studies on costs. It sometimes could be hard to get data on actual construction costs versus modeled costs. The New Buildings Institute has a really good database of actual construction costs of building commercial buildings all electric versus gas. And so I'm happy to follow up with you afterward and send you a link to that. But there's lots of examples where the cost is something in the 1%, if at all, range higher than building with fossil fuels.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else have any other questions? you can just unmute and ask the question. I don't see anyone in the chat.
I'm Paul Poirier, and I do a lot of restaurants. I'm an architect. And I was wondering if there was any movement to try to eliminate the need for a Class 1 hood for an all-electric induction cooktop because there's no open flame. I think if you were able to do that, a lot of people would adopt induction because a Class 2 hood is a lot less expensive than putting in a Class 1 hood.
That is an excellent question, and I don't know the answer to that question, but I'm happy to look it up and get back to you on that. I don't know if the new Title 24 addresses that. If you do install all electric, if you are not required to put in the more expensive, someone on the line may have an answer for you, and if not, I'm happy to follow up with you.
If anyone has an answer or expertise, please feel free to unmute yourself. And it's more of a forum, it's a discussion. We have this 20 minutes of discussion.
Mohammed, I've got a question for Johanna. We just cover a lot of very useful and very educational materials on commercial kitchen. Thinking about the kind of resources that are available on BDC's website, what kind of resources to help the designer or the developer community, to learn more about, commercial, electrification, commercial building, or any case study that we can look at, just maybe you can share some of those resources that you have.
Yeah, I'm happy to. So we have a couple different things that we offer. So if you go to the BDC website, there are a couple different places that you can go. Our member portal has a lot of information with case studies and analyses and legal review and a number of other things that may be useful as you think about the buildings that you're designing and constructing. We also have something that is targeted. I know we have some local government officials. We have something called the Clean Building Compass, which is a tool dedicated to local government officials that are considering adopting all electric reach codes. And so that's a tool that's specific to government. And so I'm happy to, I put the link in one of the earlier slides, but I'm happy to send it around afterward. And so there's lots of resources available there.
Thank you, Johanna.
Any other questions?
I have another question.
Yeah, for sure. Sure.
Which I just blanked on. I think that the, let me think, let me put my words together.
Okay, no worries. Anyone else have any question? And by the way, we still have Alexandria with us with the Office of Sustainability, San Mateo County. She talked about incentives and programs. So if any one of you have questions on that. Okay, I don't see anyone else. There are a lot of references and materials in the group chat. So this is actually good. There are like so many links for embodied carbon policy and zero carbon buildings. Yes, yes.
That's my question. So back to one's own house and reconfiguring, which I think is interesting. I wondered if everybody reconfigures the house, how does PG&E supply all of the electricity for this new demand? Has that been evaluated?
Yeah, that is one of the biggest challenges I think facing us. And so it's been upgrading the electrical grid system and the infrastructure that is required to accommodate all of the demand on the electric grid, not just from electrifying what we have now, but also from the increasing demand for air conditioning with growing temperatures, is going to be, I think, one of the biggest challenges facing our country in the next 5 years. We've been very pleased to see the Biden administration talk about putting some significant infrastructure investment funds into upgrading the grid, but this is going to be one of the biggest challenges. You've hit on probably the biggest challenge I think facing us going forward. We're not close to reaching that, so do go electrify the buildings that you're working on right now, but it is going to be something that needs to get addressed for sure.
Johanna, kind of a follow-on question to that. For folks who live in somewhat outlying areas where there may be more disruption of power from time to time, is the fallback then, going all electric by or utilizing batteries? Is that kind of the way around this, by not being able to have to go to gas or something as a fallback position or something?
Yeah, I mean, we really need to take whole building approaches that not just electrify, but start, of course, with energy efficiency, which we always need to start with, look at on-site renewables, look at on-site storage. It's nice to see that on-site storage is something that has been addressed in new Title 24 requirements. And we're also hoping that some of the incentive programs that are coming down from the state in 2022 will provide incentives for solar and storage. So that's a big issue. I will mention, I was reading a study the other day that looked at the resilience of gas pipes versus electric infrastructure in the event of a big storm. And while electric systems tend to go down more easily than natural gas systems, they are brought back online much more quickly than natural gas systems. So while electrical systems can go down in a big storm, typically the longest time frame to get them back online was 7 days, according to this report. Whereas for natural gas systems, it can take up to 6 months to get those systems back online and fully operating. And we saw some of this in Texas. That was part of the problem there as well. So there are a lot of very significant resilience and adaptation considerations with going all electric.
Okay, I think Paul had a question. Paul, you want to unmute and ask your question? I see you're raising your hand.
I already asked it.
Oh, okay.
Thanks, sorry.
No worries. Okay, we are at 7:11, so we will give to one last question. Anyone has any last question, thoughts, comments before we close? Okay, Kenny, you want to do the closing?
Well, thank you everyone for joining to this evening event. It's been a very educational evening. We learned a lot about, some of the, the information we have to learn about how to, really saving Earth essentially, and how we can do better job, with kitchen equipment, or how to do better job with a building. I'm sure there's a lot of way we can do it better. And I just want to say thank you to Johanna, Alexandria, and also, behind the scene, Richard Harris, the communication director of BDC, that have been working with us last couple of months to put this presentation together. We really appreciate his help. So we are right on time, 7:12, and just want to say thank you again.
We want to say thank you to Alexandria Gallizioli and to the County of San Mateo for providing more resources for us. Yeah, and we will be sharing these slides with all the attendees, and we'll be putting the video to the recording to our YouTube channel. So that will be shared with you by tomorrow max. Thank you all for attending, and
So much.
have a good night. Thank you so much all.
Good evening.
Yeah,
bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you all.
Thank you.